This video is reviewing Unit 3 for Statistics 3.1 and 3.2. It says identify the population of the sample, and I'll go and type things so that way you don't have to try to decipher my handwriting. The population of the sample. Okay, the population. A survey of 1353 American households found that 18% of the households own a computer. The population here for this survey. Way too large for print. Let's try that again. The population for this survey is going to be 1,353 households, because a population is everybody in that population. So 1,353, and the sample is 18% of the households. So 18% were sampled, 72% were 82% were not sampled. Okay, for letter B. A recent survey of 2,625 elementary school children found some stuff. The population is 2,625 elementary schools to children. And the sample is, dun, 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 the sample is 28% that classified as obese. Classify as obese. Okay, the average weight of every 6th person entering the mall within a 3-hour period was 146 pounds. Okay, every 6th person entering the mall within a 3-hour period. Okay, so this one is not as specific as the last one. The population are all the people entering mall within 3-hour period. And the sample are every 6th person. All right, for 2, determine whether the numerical value is a parameter or a statistic. So this one I'll just abbreviate. I'm going to either put a P or an S. A P or an S for parameter or statistic. And let's see what we have for the first one. The first one says, a recent survey by the alumni of a major university indicated that the average salary of 10,000 of its 300,000 graduates was 125,000. All right, 10,000 of its 300,000 graduates. That tells me it's a statistic. That was a sample. So there was a sample, which means that we had a statistic. And I lied to you. I said I was going to put just the letter, but I decided not to. So because we had a sample of all 300,000 graduates, we now have a statistic. The average salary of all assembly line employees at a certain manufacturer is 33,000. Oh, look at that. All employees. All employees means that we have a population. And because we have a population, we have a parameter. Let me just box these in so that way you know. Ooh, all right, letter C. The average late fee for 360 credit card holders was found to be $56.75. Well, it doesn't sound like there were very many any credit card holders that were excluded here. So this is going to also be a population, which means that we have a parameter. For 3, for the studies described, identify the population sample, population parameter, and sample statistic. Okay, I'm going to type this out again. So let's see what we have. The US Today internet poll, readers responded voluntarily to the question, do you consume at least one caffeinated beverage every day? Okay, the population is anyone that reads US Today. So population is anyone that reads USA Today. Parameter, all those that answered the question. The sample, those that voluntarily respond. and the statistic percentage of those that answered yes or no. I'm just going to change my answer above here. 100% answers the question yes or no. And I'm assuming they had yes or no. They could have been declined as well, which would have been a response bias. Okay, so there's number 3. Let's go into 3A. Let's go to 3B. Again, we're going to do the same exact thing, and we're going to identify. Astronomers typically determine the distance to galaxy by measuring the distances to just a few stars within it and taking the mean average of these distance measurements. Okay, Tim determined the distance of a galaxy by measuring the distance to just a few stars within it and taking the mean of these distance measurements. Okay, so the distance to a galaxy. Well, the population would be the measurement of all those distances. And technically the population is just going to be all the stars in the galaxy. The parameter would be the average of all distances to all stars. The sample, the sample is the few stars, and the statistic is the average of those few stars. I'll just decrease the size here so we can actually see what I wrote. Ooh, look at that. I'm just going to change the color to line it up with what we had before. Yep. Sorry. Yep. Here we go. Let's go. Next one. Decide which method of data collection you would use to collect data for the study. Is this going to be an observational study, experiment, or survey? Observational study, experiment, or survey. I am actually going to have us cross this off for Mr. Lakin's classes because we haven't entirely gone over that. So we're going to go to number 5. Identify the sampling technique used. Random, cluster, stratified, convenience, or systematic. Every fifth person is going to be systematic. Systematic was taught as every nth person, so this is systematic. Let's go to the next one. At a local community college, 5 math classes are randomly selected out of 20 math classes, and all the students from each class are interviewed. So because we took a sample of groups, a sampling of groups, this is why I don't write. You can't read this. A sampling of groups, that is going to be a cluster. Because all the students from those 5 math classes will be interviewed, and a sampling of, but the groups were randomly selected. This is going to be cluster. Okay. Researcher randomly selects and interviews 50 male and 50 female teachers. This sounds like it's going to be pretty random. It doesn't say anything else about how they were grouped or anything of that nature. So I'm just going to go with random here. Makes the most sense to me. I hope it makes the most sense to you. And a researcher for an airline interviews all of the passengers on 5 randomly selected flights. So this time it's all the passengers on 5 randomly selected flights. I'm going to do 2 things here. And I'm going to add to one of the other answers here. I would go with convenience, as all of these people were conveniently located for this researcher to go ahead and administer this interview. And all the passengers on 5 randomly selected flights. Sounds like cluster again, because they took all of the passengers from all the selected flights. So this is definitely going to be cluster. Sorry, that was my wife saying it's okay to make this video. Clearly, I did not wait for her permission. I would also say at a local community college, 5 math classes are randomly selected out of 20. That could also be a convenience because you are conveniently targeting those that are already in the community college, but not necessarily. Okay, next. And one thing we didn't use for this one was stratified. Stratified. And we didn't use stratified because what the problem would have to say is that, so let's take the community college one. If all 20 classes were randomly selected, but only a few students from each class were randomly selected, that would be stratified. For D, a researcher for an airline interviews all the passengers on 5 randomly selected flights, we would switch that to stratified if it said a researcher for an airline all interviews some passengers on all randomly selected flights. And I'll bring up the picture here that seemed to have helped students the last time. Let me do that right now. Actually, do we have more of these? Yeah, let me get that picture for you. I'm going to go to this one that you just saw on the screen here, and I'll leave this up here for a second because this is what I showed you in class. Stratified random sampling is on the left where members from each group are selected. So a couple members from black group, blue group, purple group, red group, brown group, and green group are all selected for stratified random sampling, but those members that were selected in each group were randomly selected. Whereas cluster sampling, everybody in a group is selected, it's just the groups are randomly selected. So stratified random sampling are individuals are randomly selected. And I'm just going to jot this down here so we have it. Stratified random sampling are individuals are randomly selected from all groups. And for the cluster sampling, groups are randomly selected and all partake. Okay, so again, that's what the difference is between systematic and cluster. I hope the picture makes more sense than the words, or the words make more sense than the picture, or both make sense. I just want you leaving here kind of understanding it a little bit more than you did before. I'm just organizing it so it's a little bit more readable. Feel free to pause to just jot down anything that you need to about this. So now going back to this. Based on 12,500 responses from 42,000 surveys, so this is a sample sent to its alumni, a major university estimated that the annual salary of its alumni was 92,500. Okay, so what they did is they sent surveys to alumni and the alumni responded. So again, surveys were sent out to alumni and 12,500 were responded of what their annual salary is. This sounds like a voluntary response, and I don't see that on here, so I'm just going to type that in because that one makes the most sense to me. The reason I think this is voluntary response is because the people got a survey and then they had to choose to respond to it. So this sounds like a voluntary response sampling. Now the answer key I looked up has has a random sampling. I would disagree with the random sampling in the sense that I don't actually see how they were randomly selected. Were they randomly selected by a number generator or a random number generator or flipping a coin, etc. So I don't necessarily see the randomness of it, which is why I disagree with their answers. I would go with voluntary response, and I didn't see that as a sampling technique here. I want to also go back one more and go to this one, which is going to be number 5C. In the answer key, 5C said that this was stratified. I can kind of see this was stratified, but I also would want to see that these were out of some groups. It says 50 male and 50 female teachers, and the male and female are the groups, I suppose. But that's not clear. So I'm going to put strat in parentheses here. And I also will want to indicate that if this was something for you on a test, if you can argue your way through it, recognizing the term, and yeah, if I marked it wrong and you're like, hey, but I really think it's supposed to be this, I'd give it to you if you argued correctly. Okay, community college student interviews everyone in a biology class to determine the percentage of students that own a car. Okay, if everyone's being interviewed, It's not necessarily a cluster, even though everyone's being interviewed. It's not like the community college student just looked at all the different biology classes and said, I'm going to select this biology class. They didn't do that. They just interviewed everyone in biology class. I'm going to go with convenience sampling here because it was very convenient for that community college student to interview. Convenience. Sorry, not convenience. Okay, convenience. All right. G, a market researcher randomly selects 200 drivers under 35 years of age and 100 drivers over 35 years of age. This definitely shows random because it says random in there. And again, I'm going to differ with the answer key here. The answer key actually indicates this is stratified. Under 35 years of age and 100 drivers over 35 years of age. Given that there are these two categories here, both under 35 years and over 35 years, those being the two categories, I could see how it's also stratified. So stratified would make sense. And if you put that on a test, I would, and I marked it wrong, and you came up and argued, well, Mr. Lakin, there are two groups, and all they did was select a few out of each of those groups, I'd be good with that. So random or stratified. For H, all the interviewers, I'm sorry, all the teachers from 85 randomly selected nations middle schools were interviewed. All of the teachers from 85 randomly selected nations middle schools were interviewed. Well, there's a lot more than 85 middle schools in the nation, which means that this is cluster. There were groups randomly selected, and everyone in the groups that were selected were interviewed. This is definitely cluster. If you put random, you would get some points because they were randomly selected, but cluster was the main idea that's going for here. I, to avoid working late, the quality control manager inspects the last 10 items produced that day. The last 10 items are not the every other 10 items. And to avoid working late, this sounds like they're trying to be really convenient about this. So I'm going with convenience on this one. The key here was avoiding working late. And the one above, it was interviews everyone. Well, no, that one's not as clear. I'm going to keep going. The names of 70 contestants are written on 70 cards. The cards are placed in a bag, and 3 names are picked from the bag. That is a classic random. Okay, explain what bias there is in a study done entirely online. Oh, okay. For this one, the bias that there is, well, number one, not everyone may be online. So if that's the case, we have undercoverage bias. The reason it's undercoverage bias is because not everybody may be online. Number 7, a local newspaper ran a survey by asking, do you support the development of a weapon that could kill millions of people? Determine whether the question is biased and why. This is definitely biased. Oh, that's funny. And the reason that this is biased is because it says kill millions of people. That sounds pretty slanted to me. Okay, next. And there's the solutions. I hope I got them all correct. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped you a little bit more with it. And I believe we got all of them correct. Good luck. Thank you.